She texted at 2 a.m. saying she was at his place and wouldn't be coming home, essentially ending our 3 years together through a single message. I stared at my phone screen in the dark bedroom, reading those words over and over until they stopped feeling real. Brianna had never stayed out all night without calling first, never disappeared without explanation, never been the type to send cryptic messages designed to hurt. The text was brutal in its casual cruelty, mentioning his name like I should know exactly who he was, like this betrayal had been building for months while I remained completely oblivious. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, waiting for the follow-up text that would explain this was some kind of mistake or misunderstanding, that she'd been drinking and made a terrible decision she already regretted. Instead, my phone buzzed with another message asking if I was even going to respond, followed by a third telling me not to wait up for her tomorrow either. I typed back 2 words that felt both completely natural and utterly final in the moment. Wasn't planning to. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know about where we stood and what our 3 years together had actually meant to her. I got up, turned on every light in the apartment, and started boxing up every trace of her existence in my space. Her makeup scattered across my bathroom counter went into a cardboard box first, followed by the designer perfumes she'd left on my dresser and the jewelry she kept in my nightstand drawer for sleepovers that had gradually become permanent residents. I moved through each room methodically, collecting 3 years' worth of accumulated belongings she'd gradually claimed space for in my life. Her books filled 2 boxes, everything from veterinary textbooks to romance novels she'd insisted on keeping here for convenience. Her clothes took 4 more boxes, including the expensive work outfits she'd bought with the employee discount from the clinic and the designer dresses I'd purchased for special occasions. Her shoes alone required 3 separate trips to my truck, an impressive collection that had slowly taken over my bedroom closet until I was keeping my own shoes in the living room. By 4 a.m., I was loading the last box of her kitchen gadgets and specialty teas she'd insisted on keeping here because my apartment was closer to her work than her own place. The local homeless shelter didn't open until 6 a.m., but I sat in their parking lot with my truck bed full of her belongings, drinking coffee from a thermos and watching the sunrise reflect off the donation center windows. When the staff arrived for their early shift, they were amazed by the quality and quantity of items I was donating all at once. Designer handbags worth thousands of dollars, expensive skincare products she'd barely used, professional work clothes still in perfect condition, even her grandmother's vintage jewelry collection that she'd stored in my safe because her apartment wasn't secure enough for valuable items. I requested itemized donation receipts for everything, partly for tax purposes but mostly because something deep down told me I'd need documentation of this decision later. The Women's Crisis Center gratefully accepted her remaining items during my second trip, particularly excited about the nearly new laptop she'd left for working from my place and the collection of veterinary textbooks that might help someone else pursue their education. By noon, my apartment looked exactly like it had before Brianna gradually moved her life into mine over the course of months, except cleaner and somehow more spacious than I remembered. I changed my locks that same afternoon, upgrading to a smart deadbolt system that would send notifications to my phone if anyone tried using the old key. The video doorbell I installed faced the parking lot perfectly, capturing a crystal clear view of anyone approaching my front door or lingering near my truck. When my phone started ringing around 2 p.m. with Brianna's number flashing repeatedly on the screen, I let every call go to voicemail and continued organizing my newly reclaimed living space. She called 17 more times over the next few hours, filling my voicemail box to capacity with what I assumed were increasingly panicked messages about needing to talk and explain herself. I never listened to a single recording, but the notification count kept climbing steadily until the system stopped accepting new messages entirely. At 6 p.m. sharp, I watched through my new doorbell camera as her familiar car pulled into my parking lot, her silhouette clearly visible behind the wheel for nearly an hour before she finally gathered the courage to approach my door. She knocked softly at first, then more insistently when I didn't respond, calling my name and promising she could explain everything if I'd just give her 5 minutes to talk. When her old key failed to work in the newly changed lock, she knocked harder, her voice taking on a desperate edge that carried clearly through the walls I was hiding behind. I sat in my living room reading a book I'd been meaning to start for months, occasionally glancing at my phone as she called repeatedly from the driveway, each attempt going straight to the completely full voicemail box. Eventually, after what felt like hours of knocking and calling, her car disappeared from view, leaving behind only the echo of unanswered questions and the complete silence of a life finally returned to its rightful owner. The next morning, I watched through my doorbell camera as Brianna returned to find the donation receipts I'd taped to my front door, itemizing everything from her grandmother's vintage jewelry to her extensive shoe collection worth thousands of dollars. She stood there for nearly 20 minutes reading through the detailed lists, her hands shaking as the reality of what I'd done finally sank in completely. The receipts were thorough, documenting every single item by description and estimated value, creating an undeniable record that her belongings were gone permanently and legally. I watched her face cycle through disbelief, rage, and something that looked like genuine panic as she realized the magnitude of her situation. Her designer wardrobe, her expensive skincare routine, her professional equipment, even the sentimental items she trusted me to keep safe in my apartment, all donated to people who actually needed them while she was busy betraying our relationship. She crumpled the receipts in her fist, then smoothed them out again, probably calculating the financial impact of losing everything at once. Within an hour, I received notification from the women's shelter that someone matching her description had stormed into their facility demanding to speak with whoever was in charge of donations. The staff member who called me sounded both amused and exasperated as she explained that Brianna had demanded her items back, claiming they'd been donated without her permission by a vindictive ex-boyfriend. When they explained that donated items are immediately distributed to families in need throughout the city and couldn't be retrieved, she'd threatened to call the police and accused them of receiving stolen property. The shelter director had calmly explained that all donations were properly documented with receipts and that the person who donated the items was under no legal obligation to obtain permission from someone who didn't live at his address. Brianna had left in a fury, but not before creating enough of a scene that security cameras captured her license plate and several staff members could provide detailed descriptions if needed later. Her next move was showing up at my auto repair shop, where my business partner Dave informed her that I'd taken a sudden vacation to visit my sister in another state. Dave later told me she'd spent nearly an hour questioning him about my travel plans, trying to determine exactly when I'd be back and whether she could reach me through the shop's business line. He'd remained professionally polite but firm, explaining that he couldn't discuss employee whereabouts with unauthorized individuals and suggesting she try calling me directly if she needed to communicate. What he didn't tell her was that I was actually just staying at his guest house across town, taking a few days off to let the initial drama settle while keeping a safe distance from any potential confrontations. Security footage from my apartment building showed her sitting in her car outside for 6 consecutive hours that same day, making dozens of phone calls and sending what appeared to be lengthy text messages to a number that now went directly to a disconnected message. She'd changed her approach from demanding explanations to promising she could fix everything if I'd just give her one chance to make things right. When those attempts failed, she tried using her friends' phones to reach me, but discovered I'd preemptively blocked everyone in our mutual social circle after realizing they'd probably be recruited for exactly this purpose. I'd spent the previous evening methodically going through my contact list and social media connections, blocking anyone who might serve as a communication channel between us. Her coworker from the veterinary clinic called my shop pretending to need motorcycle repair services, asking oddly specific questions about my schedule and availability that made Dave suspicious enough to take detailed notes. When she asked whether the owner would be personally handling her motorcycle maintenance and seemed disappointed to learn I specialized in cars and trucks rather than bikes, Dave realized she was fishing for information rather than seeking actual services. He politely told her we didn't service motorcycles and recommended a shop across town, then immediately called to warn me about the attempted contact. The whole situation was becoming a masterclass in how quickly someone's desperation can escalate when they realize they've lost something valuable through their own poor choices, and I was grateful to have put distance between myself and the chaos she was creating while trying to undo consequences she'd brought entirely upon herself. Desperate to locate me, Brianna began creating fake social media profiles and dating app accounts to monitor my activity and attempt contact through platforms where she thought I wouldn't recognize her. I discovered her first attempt when a profile named Jessica, with a stock photo, tried to add me on Facebook, asking if I remembered her from high school even though the supposed shared memories made no sense for someone who'd actually attended my school. Within days, similar profiles appeared across Instagram, LinkedIn, and even professional networking sites, all using different names but following the same pattern of claiming previous connections while fishing for current information about my location and activities. I'd anticipated this escalation, so I'd already deleted all photos of us together from my social media accounts and changed my relationship status to single within hours of her original text, making it clear to anyone checking that the relationship was definitively over. I also systematically unfriended her entire family and blocked them on every platform, having learned from previous relationship disasters that family members often become unwitting intelligence gatherers during messy breakups. Her attempts to reach me through professional networking sites backfired spectacularly when several of my clients began receiving strange messages about urgent personal matters that required immediate contact with me. One client forwarded me a message from someone claiming to be my cousin who needed to reach me about a family emergency, asking for my current phone number and home address because all her previous contact information was apparently outdated. Another client received a message from someone claiming to be a former colleague who needed to discuss a job opportunity but couldn't reach me through normal channels. These obvious phishing expeditions forced me to issue apologies and explanations to my professional contacts, assuring them that I wasn't involved in any family emergencies or job searches that would require third-party intervention. The whole situation was embarrassing enough that I had to send a brief email to my client list explaining that someone was impersonating various people to gather my personal information and that any legitimate business communications should come through official channels. I suspected her next move would be infiltrating my workplace, so I warned Dave to be alert for unusual inquiries from people claiming to need immediate contact with me for personal reasons. Sure enough, her coworker from the veterinary clinic convinced her to pose as a potential customer inquiring about motorcycle repairs, but Dave recognized the suspicious nature of her questions when she seemed more interested in my schedule than actual services. When the fake customer couldn't provide basic information about the motorcycle she supposedly needed repaired, Dave politely ended the call and added her number to our blocked list. Brianna's frustration with these failed attempts led her to try leaving negative reviews for my auto repair shop using multiple fake accounts, claiming we'd provided poor service and overcharged for basic maintenance work. The reviews were obviously fabricated, mentioning services we didn't even offer and using technical terms incorrectly in ways that revealed the reviewer had no actual knowledge of automotive repair. The review platform's algorithm quickly identified the suspicious activity, removing all the fake reviews and temporarily banning her IP address for violating their terms of service regarding false information. Her social media stalking became increasingly obvious as she ran out of convincing fake personas, with new profiles appearing that had no post history, no friends, and profile photos that reverse image searches revealed were stolen from random websites. I started screenshotting these attempts for documentation, creating a growing folder of evidence that showed her escalating harassment behavior across multiple platforms and services. The pattern was clear: someone who couldn't accept that their actions had consequences and was willing to lie, impersonate others, and manipulate various systems to regain contact with someone who'd clearly chosen to end all communication. What struck me most about her digital behavior was how it perfectly reflected the same entitled mindset that had led to her 2 a.m. betrayal text in the first place: the assumption that she could manipulate situations to her advantage without regard for boundaries or other people's choices. Brianna's desperation reached new heights when she began manipulating family members and friends to serve as unwitting accomplices in her attempts to reach me. Her most brazen move was contacting my elderly mother, claiming she'd left important medical documents at my apartment and needed to retrieve them urgently for an upcoming doctor's appointment. My mother, who knew nothing about the breakup details, initially offered to help coordinate a meeting between us, concerned that Brianna might need access to health records or insurance information that could affect her medical care. The conversation might have worked if Brianna had been smarter about her approach, but when my mother asked specifically what type of medical documents she needed, Brianna couldn't provide a coherent answer. She claimed they were related to a specialist referral, then changed her story to say they were insurance forms, and finally settled on saying they were prescription records, none of which made sense for someone who worked at a veterinary clinic and had her own health insurance through her employer. My mother's nursing background made her suspicious of the inconsistent medical claims, and she ended the call promising to contact me about the supposed documents but privately wondering why Brianna couldn't simply request copies from her doctor's office like any normal patient would do. When my mother called to ask about these mysterious medical documents, I had to explain the real situation and ask her to block Brianna's number, feeling terrible that my ex-girlfriend's desperation had involved my family in her harassment campaign. Brianna's next scheme involved manipulating her own younger sister Emma into applying for a part-time position at the coffee roastery next to my auto repair shop, with instructions to gather intelligence about my daily schedule and habits. Emma was a college sophomore who needed the job and probably didn't fully understand the stalking implications of what her sister was asking her to do. The plan seemed clever enough, positioning someone close to my workplace who could observe my comings and goings while appearing to have a legitimate reason for being there every day. Unfortunately for Brianna, Emma bore a strong family resemblance that I recognized immediately when she started working at the coffee shop and began asking unusually specific questions about the auto repair customers. When Emma mentioned that she'd heard I was a regular customer and wondered if I had any recommendations for reliable mechanics, followed by questions about what days I typically came in for coffee, the connection became obvious. I quietly informed the coffee shop owner about the situation, explaining that I was dealing with harassment from an ex-girlfriend and suspected the new employee might be gathering information on her behalf. The owner was understanding and agreed to keep an eye on the situation, but Emma's behavior became increasingly obvious as she tried to fulfill her sister's intelligence-gathering mission. She would position herself near the window when my truck was parked outside, take photos of my vehicle with her phone, and attempt to eavesdrop on conversations I had with other customers. When she started asking Dave direct questions about my personal life and schedule during his coffee runs, claiming she was interested in getting to know the neighboring business owners better, he immediately recognized the setup and warned me about her transparent fishing expedition. The coffee shop owner fired Emma on her second day after catching her taking photos of my license plate and noting down the time I'd arrived and left, explaining that using employment as a cover for stalking activities violated both workplace policy and basic professional standards. Brianna's manipulation of her sister had backfired completely, costing Emma a job she actually needed while exposing another layer of the harassment campaign to more witnesses who could testify about the escalating behavior. Her attempts to recruit mutual friends as intermediaries also failed spectacularly when my lawyer contacted several of them about the harassment, explaining that facilitating unwanted contact could make them legally complicit in stalking behavior. Her best friend Rachel, who'd initially agreed to pass along messages claiming Brianna just wanted closure and the chance to apologize, immediately backed away from any involvement after receiving the legal warning. Rachel called me directly to apologize for getting involved and to assure me that she wouldn't serve as a communication channel again, admitting that she'd underestimated how serious the situation had become and hadn't realized that passing along messages could have legal consequences for her as well. The legal intervention effectively ended Brianna's ability to use friends and family as proxies, leaving her isolated from the support network she'd been counting on to help her breach my boundaries and force contact I'd clearly refused to maintain. 8 months after the breakup, I began dating Luna, a freelance music producer I met at a vintage record fair downtown, someone whose passion for analog sound equipment matched my appreciation for quality craftsmanship in automotive restoration. Luna was everything Brianna wasn't, independent and creative, with her own successful business and zero interest in monitoring my text messages or demanding access to my financial accounts. Our relationship developed naturally over shared interests in music history and weekend trips to estate sales where we'd hunt for rare vinyl records and vintage audio equipment, conversations that could last for hours without either of us checking our phones or worrying about social media appearances. I kept our relationship completely off social media initially, having learned valuable lessons about privacy and digital boundaries from the harassment campaign that had finally started to quiet down after months of legal warnings. Luna understood my caution about online exposure and shared my preference for living in the moment rather than documenting every coffee date and dinner for public consumption. Unfortunately, Brianna discovered our relationship through a private investigator she'd hired using petty cash she'd stolen from the veterinary clinic, a decision that would eventually cost her the job she'd managed to keep despite her increasingly erratic behavior over the previous months. The private investigator had photographed us together at several locations, creating a detailed report about my new relationship that apparently sent Brianna into a complete emotional breakdown when she realized I'd genuinely moved on with someone who seemed happy and stable. The photos showed Luna and me laughing together at record stores, sharing meals without constantly checking our phones, and simply enjoying each other's company in ways that highlighted everything Brianna and I had lacked during our final months together. Rather than accepting that I'd found happiness with someone more compatible, Brianna immediately began planning sabotage campaigns designed to destroy Luna's business and drive a wedge between us. Her first target was Luna's home recording studio, which she attempted to sabotage by booking multiple fake sessions under different names and then never showing up, costing Luna hundreds of dollars in lost revenue from legitimate clients who couldn't be accommodated because of the fabricated bookings. The pattern was obvious after the third no-show session, all booked by different people who claimed to need urgent recording time but provided phone numbers that went straight to voicemail when Luna tried to confirm the appointments. Luna's business partner recognized the deliberate sabotage and helped implement a prepayment policy that required deposits for all new clients, effectively ending the fake booking campaign but forcing Luna to change her business practices because of Brianna's vindictive interference. The harassment escalated when Brianna began showing up at local music venues during Luna's live sound engineering events, claiming to be my concerned ex-girlfriend who needed closure and demanding to speak with me about unresolved issues from our relationship. During one particularly mortifying incident at a jazz club where Luna was managing sound for a local quartet, Brianna approached the stage during intermission and announced to the confused audience that she needed to speak with her ex-boyfriend about their relationship problems, apparently unaware that I wasn't even present at that particular show. Venue security escorted her out after Luna explained the restraining order situation and provided documentation about the ongoing harassment, but not before Brianna had disrupted the performance and created an uncomfortable scene that reflected poorly on Luna's professional reputation. Her behavior became increasingly unhinged as she began vandalizing Luna's car with permanent marker messages about stolen boyfriends and home wrecking, leaving threatening notes under the windshield wipers that detailed intimate knowledge about our daily routines and favorite restaurants. The vandalism forced Luna to install a security system at her apartment and vary her daily routines to avoid predictable patterns that Brianna might exploit for further harassment or property damage. Most disturbingly, Brianna began following Luna to grocery stores and coffee shops, positioning herself in nearby aisles or tables where she could observe and occasionally photograph Luna's activities, creating a pattern of stalking behavior that made both of us realize the situation had escalated beyond simple heartbreak into genuine safety concerns that required immediate legal intervention. After Brianna broke into Luna's apartment building and left disturbing gifts outside her door, including photos of Luna and me together with threatening notes written in red ink about stolen boyfriends and karma, Luna finally convinced me to file for a restraining order against my increasingly unhinged ex-girlfriend. The breaking point came when Luna discovered a collection of items arranged outside her apartment door like some twisted shrine, including printed photos of us from the private investigator's surveillance, dead flowers, and handwritten letters detailing Brianna's theories about our relationship and her plans to make Luna pay for interfering in what she still considered her territory. The notes were disturbing enough that Luna's building management immediately reviewed security footage and discovered Brianna had been tailgating residents to gain access to the secured building, sometimes waiting in her car for hours until someone opened the main entrance. Building security provided clear video evidence of Brianna entering the building without authorization and placing items outside Luna's door at 3 a.m, behavior that crossed every legal boundary regarding trespassing and harassment. During the court proceedings, Brianna's lawyer argued that she was suffering from abandonment trauma and claimed my cruel disposal of her belongings had triggered a mental health crisis requiring compassion rather than punishment. Her attorney painted a picture of a heartbroken woman whose emotional stability had been shattered by my allegedly vindictive actions, suggesting that donating her possessions without permission demonstrated my manipulative nature rather than her stalking behavior. The strategy might have worked with a more sympathetic judge, but the evidence against Brianna was overwhelming and well documented, from the fake social media profiles to the business sabotage to the break-in at Luna's building. The judge granted a temporary restraining order but mandated anger management counseling and psychiatric evaluation, requirements that Brianna initially refused while claiming the legal system was biased against women who'd been emotionally abused by controlling men. Her refusal to comply with court-ordered mental health services demonstrated exactly the kind of poor judgment and lack of accountability that had characterized her behavior throughout our relationship and the subsequent harassment campaign. She violated the restraining order within days of receiving it, sending a 75-page manifesto to my workplace that detailed our sexual history and her conspiracy theories about Luna being a rebound manipulation designed to hurt her specifically. The document was so explicit and disturbing that several clients expressed discomfort about continuing to work with someone involved in such dramatic personal conflicts, forcing me to take temporary leave while my business partner handled damage control with our customer base. The manifesto included detailed timelines of our relationship, photographs she'd taken of my apartment and belongings, and bizarre theories about Luna's motivations for dating me, all presented as evidence that I was a master manipulator who'd orchestrated the entire situation to maximize Brianna's emotional suffering. Her violation of the restraining order led to immediate arrest and a weekend in jail, an experience that seemed to shock her into recognizing the serious legal consequences her behavior had created for herself. The arrest report noted that she'd been found with additional printed materials about Luna and me, suggesting she'd been planning further harassment activities when police took her into custody. Even more telling was her family's reaction to the arrest, with both her parents and her sister Emma petitioning the court to extend the restraining order and providing their own evidence of Brianna's increasingly erratic behavior at home, including destroyed property and threats against family members who refused to help with her obsessive campaign. Her own family's testimony painted a picture of someone whose mental health had deteriorated significantly since our breakup, but who consistently refused professional help while blaming everyone else for the consequences of her own choices. The extended restraining order included provisions that prohibited any form of contact with me, Luna, our workplaces, and even our mutual acquaintances, effectively isolating Brianna from any avenue for continuing the harassment that had consumed her life for over a year. 18 months later, Luna and I were living together in a new apartment across town, having built a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine compatibility rather than the financial dependency and emotional manipulation that had characterized my time with Brianna. Our life together was peaceful in ways I'd forgotten were possible, filled with quiet Sunday mornings listening to vintage records, collaborative projects restoring audio equipment, and conversations about future plans that excited both of us rather than making either partner feel trapped or suffocated. Brianna had moved to another state following court-ordered intensive therapy and her family's intervention, finally accepting that her behavior had crossed every reasonable boundary and required professional help to address the underlying issues that had driven her obsessive campaign. I received one final communication from her through certified mail, a formal apology letter written under her therapist's supervision that acknowledged her 2 a.m. text had been deliberately designed to hurt me and that my response had been completely justified given her betrayal. The letter was stilted and obviously guided by therapeutic intervention rather than genuine personal insight, but it represented the first time she'd taken actual responsibility for her actions rather than blaming me for triggering her emotional breakdown through my cruel disposal of her belongings. She admitted that sending that text while she was with another man had been calculated to maximize my pain, and that she'd expected me to beg for her return rather than accepting her decision with dignity and moving forward immediately. The apology included a cashier's check attempting to compensate for the donated items, an amount that was probably close to the actual value of everything I'd given to charity but missed the point entirely about why I'd made those donations in the first place. I deposited the check and immediately donated the entire amount to the same women's shelter where I'd taken her belongings, making the donation in Luna's name as a gesture of appreciation for her patience and support throughout the legal proceedings. The women's shelter director remembered the original donation and was amused by the full-circle nature of Brianna essentially funding her own charitable contribution through forced restitution payments. My old voicemail box, which I'd never bothered to clear during the harassment campaign, contained over 200 messages from various numbers Brianna had used to circumvent my blocking efforts, creating a digital archive of her descent into obsession that documented every phase of her escalating behavior. Luna and I spent an evening listening to random selections from this collection, marveling at how someone could spiral so completely from heartbreak into criminal behavior rather than simply accepting that relationships sometimes end and moving forward with their own life. The messages ranged from tearful apologies to angry accusations to bizarre conspiracy theories about Luna's motivations, providing a comprehensive timeline of Brianna's deteriorating mental state and her complete inability to accept personal responsibility for the consequences of her own choices. I finally deleted the entire collection during our apartment warming party, symbolically clearing away the last remnants of that toxic chapter while surrounded by friends who'd supported us through the legal drama and new acquaintances who knew nothing about the stalking situation. The story concluded perfectly when I proposed to Luna at the same vintage record fair where we'd originally met, a location that represented the authentic connection we'd built based on shared interests and mutual respect rather than financial convenience or social expectations. She said yes while we were examining a rare pressing of a Miles Davis album, surrounded by the sounds and atmosphere that had brought us together, creating a memory that belonged entirely to us without any shadows from previous relationships or dramatic confrontations. Looking back, I realized that Brianna's 2 a.m. betrayal text had been the best thing that ever happened to me, forcing me to recognize my own worth and refuse to settle for someone who saw me as a safety net rather than a partner, ultimately leading me to someone who appreciated my thoughtfulness and stability rather than taking them for granted while searching for something more exciting elsewhere.